In the dying winter of 1903, when the last winds scraped along the Kentucky ridges like hunger-blind wolves, the small mountain town of Harlow Bend fell under a silence so unnatural that it made the old men whisper and the young children clutch their beds at night. The silence was not simply the absence of sound. It felt like something listening, watching, and no one felt its weight more than the people who lived in the shallow shadow of St. Elias Church, where the bell rope hung limp and unwilling, as though it no longer wished to be touched by human hands. This is the story of the town that stopped ringing its church bell. And the reason it still echoes in whispered mountain folklore. Long after the town itself withered away, the valley that held its breath, Harlow Bend, rested in a hollow that locals said the mountains had carved out deliberately, an indentation in the land where fog pooled like spilled milk and lingered until past noon on most days. Outsiders rarely found the town unless they had business there, and even fewer stayed long enough to learn its rhythms. There were no tidy rows of houses or bustling storefronts. Instead, Harlow Bend sprawled in a crooked line of cabins perched on sloping mud paths, each built from whatever lumber and stone its owner could find. The Briar Hollow Mine, the town's lifeblood, sat at the far northern edge, its entrance a black wound stitched into the hillside. The mine's whistle, once a daily reminder of work shifts, had not blown since the thaw of the previous spring. Some said the air deep underground had grown too thin. Others said something else was down there, something that drove the men away without a fight. But the mine's darkness was not what the townspeople feared most. It was the church bell, once a centerpiece of the town's identity. It now hung silent. The rope that connected ground to bell clung to its pulley like a noose resigned to its fate. Children dared each other to brush their fingers against it. Adults avoided walking beneath the tower's shadow altogether, for in Harlow Bend, the bell had always been more than a bell. It had been a messenger, and lately, its messages had turned grim. Elder Nathaniel Pike, keeper of the toll. Every town has one man who carries its secrets, whether he wants to or not. In Harlow Bend, that burden fell on Elder Nathaniel Pike, a gaunt figure whose bones looked as if they had been carved from old fence posts and whose eyes reflected torchlight even in daylight. Pike had been ringing the bell since he was 12 years old. He had learned the rhythm of every toll, the slow beats for morning, the brisk pattern for storms, the solitary peal for births. He believed with absolute conviction that the bell did not merely echo events, it announced them, predicted them, warned of them. And over time, the bell had begun to take on a mind of its own. Pike kept a ledger, an oversized, leather-bound book with pages yellowed from coal dust which documented every ring. He wrote not with a schoolteacher's neatness, but with a miner's trembling urgency. Some entries were only a few words long, while others sprawled across the page in frantic, slanted lines. Those who caught glimpses of the ledger said Elder Pike was not the only one writing in it. When asked about the bell's origins, Pike always gave the same answer: it was made from sorrow and forged in grief. Don't ask more than that. But there was more, far more, that he didn't dare speak. The people of Harlow Bend, if the bell was the town's uneasy heart, its people were the brittle bones holding it upright. Martha Kincaid, a widow in her early 30s. Martha lived in a small cabin with a leaning chimney and a porch bench that creaked even when no one sat on it. She baked bread early every morning, bread that smelled faintly of rosemary. Even when she swore, she didn't use any. She had lost her husband to the mine and her infant daughter to the fever. Now she lived alone, always keeping matches nearby because she claimed the darkness moved differently in her home. Jonas Hale Jonas, the mine foreman, had hands like boulders and a cough that scraped the back of his throat. He had worked the mine for 21 years, long enough to know that mountains remember every injury and repay it in their own time. Jonas had lost 3 men the previous spring, claimed by a sudden cave-in that no one heard coming. He said the mine had gone too still afterward, as though something deep down was holding its breath. Clara Whitlow at just 16. Clara had already seen more grief than most. She swept the church steps each morning and lit candles for those whose names were fading from memory. Her diary, a small cloth-bound book, was always tucked beneath her apron. She wrote things she never said aloud, things about shadows that flickered when no light burned, and footsteps that followed her even on silent winter days. Other residents, old Miss Alderton, the Harper brothers, the Bramble twins, floated through daily life with the air of people who felt the mountain pressing down on them. Conversations ended when the wind shifted. Doors were double-latched at dusk, and no one, under any circumstance, stepped inside the bell tower without Elder Pike. After all, the bell tower had begun to breathe, the final summer before the silence, to understand why the bell stopped ringing. One must understand the summer before the silence. When the first signs of the unnatural crept into Harlow Bend, without announcement or apology, it began with the fog. Fog in Harlow Bend was nothing new. But this fog, it moved. It had weight. It had direction. It curled around the ankles of livestock and made the dogs whine. It seeped through cabin doors no matter how much cloth was shoved beneath them. Then came the humming. Townsfolk heard a low, metallic vibration ripple across the valley. It wasn't quite a sound, more like a pressure, a trembling inside the bones. When mothers pressed pillows around their children's ears, the humming grew stronger, as though it was hunting for someone particular. Finally, the bell rang on its own. 3 tolls. Firm, clear, unmistakable. Jonas Hawley swore he saw the rope jerk violently without anyone touching it. Clara, sweeping the church steps at dawn, claimed she heard a voice under the ringing, whispering through the metal. After the 3rd toll, Miss Alderton died in her rocking chair. No illness. No injury. Just gone, her eyes fixed on the bell tower outside her window. People began to sleep with their lamps burning. The ledger's first warning: by September of 1902, Elder Pike grew visibly frail. His hands twitched. His voice shook. And when someone asked why he didn't ring the bell anymore, he answered, "Because it no longer listens to me." Inside his ledger, the writing had changed. Some entries were his, shaky but legible. Others were deep gouges, as though carved by a nail or a claw. One page stood out. August 29th. The bell rang 12 times at Moonris. No. One pulled the rope. Someone else has taken the tower. He refused to say who or what, but that was the first time he warned the people that the bell had begun calling out living names of those who were next. And shortly after the new year, just days into 1903, the bell stopped ringing entirely, plunging the town into a silence that pressed against every window, every lung, every heartbeat. A silence that felt intentional. A silence that arrived only after the bell had chosen enough names, before the silence swallowed Harlow Bend. The bell at St. Elias Church rang one final time, and not a single soul in town touched the rope. Those who heard it said the tone dragged like a chain across stone. Those who felt it claimed it reached inside their ribs and plucked at their hearts. And those who stood closest swore the bell tower itself shuddered, as if something climbed down from the rafters. It was the bell's last warning, and almost no one heeded it. First week of January, 1903. The new century had barely begun its 3rd year when strange currents rippled through Harlow Bend. January arrived with a brittle chill that snapped the tips of branches and froze the creek solid, leaving fish suspended like pale ghosts beneath the ice. Yet the cold wasn't what scared people. It was the quiet. The quiet was so complete that footsteps echoed where there should have been none. People heard their own breaths too loudly. The clatter of a dropped spoon sounded like a gunshot. Even the children stopped laughing. Their games faded into silence, as if the mountain itself had asked for it. Rumor spreads quietly. In a quiet town, Martha Kincaid was the first to speak it aloud. The bell ain't rang since that night, and the silence feels wrong. Like it's holding something back. She whispered it to Jonas Hawley after church, when only a handful of townsfolk had shown up, and Elder Pike looked pale enough to blow away with the wind. Jonas didn't respond at first. He simply stared at the bell rope swaying gently in the draftless air. The rope moved like something brushed past it. Something unseen, Jonas muttered without turning. It'll ring again, but we won't want to hear it. The final ringing it came 3 days later, Saturday. January 10th, just before dawn. Everyone who survived remembered it the same way. A single long, dragging toll. Not a clean strike, not a clear note, a scrape. Like metal resisting metal. Like the bell didn't want to answer, but was forced to. Dogs howled across the hollow. A shrill, panicked sound that didn't stop until sunrise. Cattle kicked their stalls. The fog pulled in thick, curling around cabins like smoke from a smothered fire. Martha Kincaid opened her door just enough to peer outside. The fog glowed faintly, a dim, silver pulse that reminded her of dying coals. The bell tolled again. This time it was softer, more human. As though someone whispered inside its hollow body. Clara. Whitlow heard something more. She was sweeping the church steps at dawn when the fog rolled past her, heavy as wool. Her broom tapped softly against the worn boards. And as the bell's fading tone shivered through the air, she heard a breath, a sharp, trembling breath from inside the tower. She froze. The door at the base of the tower creaked open. No wind touched it. No hand pushed it. It swung wider. Wider. A shadow flickered across the threshold. Tall and thin, moving with a jerking, unnatural rhythm. Clara dropped her broom. Its handle clattered, but she didn't hear the sound. The fog swallowed it. She stepped back, hands shaking. Later, she wrote in her diary, "I could hear something inside the bell, not a voice. Exactly, more like a heartbeat. As if there was a person inside the metal, pounding to get out." She never retrieved the broom. It lay across the steps until rain washed it away. Elder Pike's fracture after the bell rang its last. Elder Nathaniel Pike locked himself inside the rectory, shutters closed, lamps covered, ledger clutched to his chest like salvation, or sin, no one could tell which. When Jonas Hawley eventually forced his way inside, he found the elder hunched at his desk, eyes bloodshot, fingers trembling around a broken quill. The ledger lay open to a page Jonas had never seen before. At the top was a single line written in firm, adult handwriting, January 10th. The bell has rejected human hands. Below it, in darker ink, blacker, almost oily, were new words, scrawled as if carved. "You should not have forged." Jonas asked, "Who wrote that?" Pike shut the ledger so fast the pages cried out like wounded birds. The elder whispered, "ID and single quotes T. And neither did you." His breath rattled weakly. "It knows we are afraid, and fear is an invitation." Jonas didn't understand. Not fully, but he saw something in Pike's eyes, look of a man who had listened to something he wished he hadn't. Something that whispered from inside a hollow tower. The disappearances begin. The bell's final toll marked the first disappearance. Eli Harper, quiet young man, always seen with dirt under his nails and a hat pulled low over his brow. That morning, his boots were found neatly placed outside his cabin door, mud on the sawless. Still warm inside. But Eli was gone. No tracks in the snow. No signs of struggle. No one heard a thing. His wife, Mary Beth Harper, ran screaming down Main Street until Jonas pulled a coat around her shoulders and told her he'd searched the ridge. He didn't say the rest aloud. Boots outside a threshold meant something old in mountain folklore and offering her a warning. 2 days later, the fog crept in again, and the bell rope began to sway. A letter found in the tower. Clara Whitlow Terrified yet curious in that youthful way only mountain children understand, crept near the tower at dusk. She did not enter. She swore she'd never do that. But something fluttering on the step caught her eye. A piece of paper folded pinned under a small stone. A letter. The handwriting did not look like Elder Pike's. It was too jagged. Too intense. As though carved by someone with shaking hands or no hands at all. The letter read, "Do not ring the bell. Do not speak to the silence. And do not look inside the tower at night. We are not alone. And we have never been alone." The signature was smeared. Clara could only make out a single initial. She gave it to Martha Kincaid, who read it twice and then burned it in her hearth. But even as flames licked the edges, the ink did not blacken right away. It bled. Slowly. Like something alive. The fog that moved with purpose. By mid-January, the fog gained shape. Not human shape, not quite, but suggestions of limbs, shoulders, bending forms that faded when stared at directly. People began avoiding the roads before dawn. Those who walked alone whispered they heard footsteps soft, matching their pace in a faint ringing hidden inside the fog. As if the bell were breathing. In. Out. One night, Martha Kincaid watched from her window as the fog drifted past the church, coiling around the tower's base. For a moment, she saw something rise within it, a silhouette that stretched, distorted, and then folded into itself. She whispered a prayer under her breath. The fog paused. As if listening, and then continued onward. Jonas Hawley descends into the mine on January 18th. Jonas decided he'd had enough of fear. Men didn't simply disappear. Fog didn't follow people. Bells didn't ring themselves. He gathered 2 miners, Samuel Rourke and Lionel Turner, and climbed to the mouth of the Briar Hollow mine. They lit their lanterns, checked their tools, stepped inside. The darkness swallowed the light, not slowly, not naturally. As though the mine wanted their lantern glow, the deeper they went, the more Jonas sensed vibrations under his boots. Not the tremors of unstable stone, no. These tremors felt rhythmic. Like a pulse, a heartbeat deep beneath the earth. Samuel whispered, "Feels like something moving." Jonas hushed him. The heartbeat grew fainter. Then stronger, then fainter again. A breathing pattern, a living pattern. Then all 3 men heard it. A faint, metallic ding, not loud. Not near, but unmistakably the tone of a bell. Samuel dropped his lantern. It shattered. Darkness roared around them. Jonas forced them back toward the entrance, every hair on his arms standing upright. When they burst out into daylight, gasping for air, Jonas swore he heard the bell one last time from deep inside the mountain. It was calling someone, or something. The night Clara saw the rope move the next night, Clara Whitlow could not sleep. Her diary entries grew frantic, pages filled with cramped writing. One line repeated over and over. The bell dreams. That night, she slipped outside, barefoot in the frost, drawn by a sensation she could not explain, an invisible tug on her thoughts. She stopped 10 yards from the tower. The rope was moving, not swaying, not fluttering, pulling, with the steady rhythm of someone ringing it. But no sound came from the bell, only a low, grinding vibration, like metal grinding bone. The rope jerked again, harder. Clara stepped back, breath frozen in her chest. Something heavy shifted inside the tower, scraping wood. A thud followed. Then, a whisper, not a voice, but the idea of a voice pressing against her skull. She fled, not daring to look back. Elder Pike's final sermon 2 weeks after the bell's final toll. Elder Pike assembled the townsfolk for a gathering. Not a sermon, he said. Sermons were useless now. He spoke with a trembling voice. A bell is meant to call the living and honor the dead. But ours was made of the wrong things. He wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold. There are names written in the bell. Not carved. Not stamped. Written from the inside. The room turned cold. Mary Beth Harper cried out, "Where is Eli? Is he inside it too?" Pike swallowed hard. The bell tolls for debts unpaid, debts forged into iron. No one understood, but everyone felt the truth clawing at them. He ended by whispering, "Leave this place if you can, before it calls your name." The silence that follows a warning, the night after Pike's gathering. The valley grew so still that even snowfall made no sound. Breaths became quieter, heartbeats grew louder. Jonas Hawley sat on his porch long after midnight, lantern dimming, watching the church tower loom against the clouds. He hated that tower, hated the bell, hated the silence, but somewhere deep in his bones he knew the silence was not safety. It was the part of the storm where something draws breath, it begins to speak. Before Harlow Bend abandoned its church, before the families fled in silence and the mines breathed their last rotten breath, something older than the town itself stirred beneath the ridge. It moved not with feet, but with memory carried on iron soot, and the trembling air around the bell of St. Elias. And when Elder Nathaniel Pike finally opened his ledger and revealed the bell's secret history, the truth struck harder than any toll ever had. Some bells are cast with metal. Others are cast with names. This one was cast with the dead, the ledgers, hidden pages. The morning after Elder Pike warned them all, Jonas Hawley returned to the rectory, this time not with questions, but with demands. The elder's door hung open, swaying as though someone had slipped inside or fled in a hurry. The floorboards moaned under Jonas's boots. Dust motes drifted in the weak sunlight like drifting spirits. Pike was nowhere, but the ledger sat on his desk open, expectant, as though waiting to be read. Jonas hesitated. He didn't want to know. But the town was unraveling, people vanishing, fog stalking the valley, the bell whispering in the night. He picked up the ledger. The pages were warm, not the warmth of a room, heated by a stove, but the warmth of something recently touched. Something alive. The first pages were familiar, careful notes of births, deaths, and storms. Jonas had seen those before. He flipped further. The handwriting changed. Lines slanted sharper. Ink bled darker. Words pressed deeper, as if carved with a trembling hand. And then halfway through, Jonas found the hidden pages. Thin, onion skin sheets, tucked between the others like secrets buried between ribs. On the first hidden page was a date, March 4th, 1821. Briar Hollow collapse underneath. 10 names were written in perfect script. Then another 10. And another. 40-6 in total. All men who had died in the mine collapse of 1821. Jonas stopped breathing. He turned the page. More names. More collapse dates. Accidents. Cave-ins. Explosions. Men never recovered, their bodies trapped beneath the ridge. Each list had a handwritten note beside it, iron taken from the wreck, given purpose in the casting. Jonas understood the meaning only slowly, so slowly that dread seeped into him like cold water through cloth. The bell was forged from the scrap metal pulled out after the collapse. Not just metal. Not just beams. Iron from the shovels, helmets, hook sand from the cages that trapped the dead. The bell hung in the tower was literally forged from the remnants of their tomb, their names melted into its walls, their last breaths sealed inside its hollow. Jonas sat down. The room tilted. The quiet pressed against him. Then he found the last hidden page. There were no names on it, just a line scrawled in that strange, gouging ink. The bell remembers who is left below, and I will not be silenced. A second line appeared beneath it, so fresh the ink still glistened. Do not let I to choose again. The handwriting was not Pike's, nor anyone Jonas knew. Jonas closed the ledger and left the rectory with the sickening certainty that Harlow Bend was being hunted not by something new, but by something old and old. Clara Whitlow's night watches. Clara could not sleep. Every night, she sat at her window with her diary in her lap and her knees drawn tight against her chest. Her mother begged her to rest, But Clara was terrified of what she saw when she closed her eyes. The rope, the tower, a shifting shape inside the fog. She wrote entry after entry, each one shorter, more frantic than the last. The bell does not sleep. Someone is standing behind it. It knows my name. The fog has faces. One night, she heard footsteps outside her window, slow, dragging, inhumanly steady. They circled her house once, twice, third time. She held her breath until her chest burned. Then came a whisper, but not through the air. It crawled directly into her skull. Clara, just her name. Soft, waiting. She bit her knuckles to keep from screaming. The whisper came again. Clara. A pause. Let me in. Her candle flickered violently. She didn't sleep for the next 2 days. Martha Kincaid. Here's the dead speak. Martha Kincaid had always been sensitive to the old stories, mountain tales about spirits that cling to iron, voices that echo through stone, and the restless dead who wander where they were never properly buried. But nothing had prepared her for what came after the bell fell silent. It began with a tapping, soft knuckles against her window. WSILL.3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. She ignored it until she heard the voice. A young man's voice. Broken. Faint. Martha. Her blood ran cold. Only one person had ever said her name that way, her husband, Reuben. Dead 10 years. Reuben? She whispered. More tapping. Faster now. She opened the door. No one was there, but the fog stood at her doorstep like a living thing. And within it saw the faint outline of a man's hand, her husband's hand. She slammed the door, bolted it, and fell to her knees. The tapping continued for nearly an hour. When it finally stopped, she heard a second voice, younger, more frantic. Help me, Miss Kincaid. Please help me. I don't want to be down there. It was Eli Harper's voice. The dead and the missing both spoke through the fog. Now, and Martha understood. The bell was not calling the living. It was letting the dead speak. Jonas and the tower. Jonas Hawley was not a man who scared easily, but the mine had changed him. Heartbeat in the depths. The metallic ringing, the crushing silence afterward. He could no longer ignore it. So that night when the fog was thinner and the moon cast a cold sickle-shaped glow, Jonas approached the church tower. The door was cracked open. Inside, it was pitch black. He struck a match. The flame sputtered. He took one step inside. The tower breathed back at him. The air moved not like a draft, but like lungs. Exhaling. Jonas froze. Then something brushed past his leg. Cold. Smooth. Heavy. Like a chain being dragged. He lit another match and saw it. The bell rope. Moving. Coiling around his boot like a living serpent. He kicked it away and stumbled back. The rope lashed upward, striking the bell. The bell didn't ring. It screamed. A long metallic wail filled the tower, vibrating the wood, shaking dust from the rafters. Jonas covered his ears, but the sound burrowed into his skull. He ran. When he reached the steps outside, the tower door slammed shut behind him. Elder Pike's return, 3 days after disappearing. Elder Pike stumbled into town just before dawn. His clothes were torn, his hair streaked with ash, his eyes hollow. He collapsed near Martha Kincaid's door. When she revived him with water and wrapped him in blankets. Pike grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Where were you? She whispered. His answer chilled her. At the mine where the bell was born. Pike hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. His skin was cold as river stones. He whispered fragments all night. Too weak to form full explanations. Forged wrong. Made from grief. They didn't stay dead. The heat didn't kill their names. Their names are trapped in the metal. At dawn, he managed one full sentence. The bell wants to be rung again, and it will. Not wait for us. The town's fear turns bitter. You cannot hide fear. In a small mountain town. It spreads faster than fire and lasts longer than winter. Parents stopped letting their children roam. Doors stayed locked even. During daylight, men who once worked the mine now paced their living rooms with shotguns. Even the animals felt it. Cows refused to leave there. Barns. Horses balked at the sight of fog. Dogs howled at the tower for hours, tails tucked, ears pinned back. What frightened them most was the sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping from inside the bell. Not ringing, not swinging. Tapping. As if someone inside the metal was knocking to be let out. The whispered names near the end of January. The names began. It started one night when the fog rolled in thick and low. Most of the town had gone to bed, though no one slept soundly. Around 2 in the morning, Mary Beth Harper jolted awake. Someone was whispering outside her window. Mary Beth. She froze. Mary Beth Harper. She clutched her blankets. Mary Beth. Open the door. She recognized the voice. It was Eli. Her missing husband. She crawled to the window and peeked through the curtain. The fog was pressed against the glass as if it had weight, as if it were leaning in, listening. Again the voice. Open the door. Mary Beth, I'm cold. She shut her eyes. And the voice changed. Deepened. Layered with others. Mary Beth Harper. She screamed across the town. Other voices rose. Clara. Samuel. Jonas. Holly. Martha. Names whispered by the missing. Names whispered by the dead. And beneath them all a deeper voice. A voice scraped through iron. A voice that echoed from inside the tower. Final entry in Clara's diary. Clara did not want to write anything. Her hands shook too much, but she forced herself. On January 29th, she wrote, There's something inside the bell. It moves. It breathes. It is learning our names. She pressed her ear to her window. Fog curled at the edge of the sill. She wrote one more line. I think it wants me most. And tenth ink stops. As if she dropped the pen. Mid-stroke. As if something else entered the room. There are nights in the mountains when the darkness grows thick enough to touch. Nights when even the moon refuses to rise. But in Harlow Bend, on the last night of January 1903, the darkness was not simply the absence of light. It was a presence, heavy, listening. And when the fog crawled in like a living tide and the bell tower began to breathe, the people of Harlow Bend finally learned what the bell had been trying to warn them about. That night, the bell did not ring. It called. The fog that arrived before the storm on the evening of January 30th. The fog rolled down the ridge with purpose, and it drifting, not floating, but descending. As though guided by unseen hands. It pooled first at the mine entrance, coating the timbers and swallowing the rusted tracks. Then it crept along the road, sliding over the frozen mud, wrapping itself around fences and slipping under doorframes. People noticed. Immediately. Jonas Holly stepped out onto his porch and watched the fog gather around the church tower like an animal circling its den. His lantern flickered 3 times before snuffing out entirely. Down the road, Martha Kincaid felt her window pane vibrate. She pressed her palm to the cold glass and felt a steady, rhythmic pulse on the other side, as if the fog itself had a heartbeat. And Clara Whitlow. Clara saw shapes inside the fog. Figures. Thin, elongated silhouettes that swayed like bodies underwater. She ran to her mother. Don't open the door tonight, she whispered. Don't answer anything. Not even if it knows your name. Her mother swallowed hard and nodded. The wind died. The silence deepened. The fog kept coming. The bell tower begins to move. Just after midnight, Jonas heard a sound that made his blood go ice cold. A creak. The doodle is low. Groaning. The church tower was swaying. Not much, just an inch or two. But buildings didn't move in Harlow Bend. Not the heavy ones. Not the old ones. Especially not the ones whose foundations had been set deep into the frozen ground. Jonas squinted through the fog. He could barely make out the silhouette of the tower, but he saw the impossible. The door at its base was opening and closing. By itself. No wind. No hands. Just an endless cycle. Cree, K. Pause. Cree, K. Stepped back into his home and barred the door. He understood. The signal. The tower was awake. And something inside it was trying to step out. Elder Pike's final warning at 2:13 a.m. Someone hammered on Martha Kincaid's door. A panicked voice. "Martha! Martha, open up!" She recognized it. Elder Nathaniel Pike. She unlatched the door and pulled him inside. He was soaked with fog, his clothes clinging to him as if he'd been dredged out of cold water. His skin was pale, lips blue. He grabbed her shoulders. I tried to stop it. Tears streaked his face. "I tried to warn you," the bell remembers. Every man who died in the mine, but it remembers the living Tuving who profited from the iron pulled from those bodies. His breath hitched. "It wants them back." Martha's voice shook. "Wants who back?" Pike's answer was barely a whisper. "All of us." Then he collapsed, clutching the ledger tight against his chest, as if it were the only thing keeping something from crawling inside him. Martha dragged him to the hearth and tended to him as best she could. But Elder Pike's eyes never left the door. The whispering chorus all across Harlow Bend. People heard it. Whispers. Not one voice. Dozens. Hundreds. Men. Women. Children. Some whispers were familiar lost family members. Fallen miners, men buried beneath the ridge. Others were strangers, speaking in dialects older than the town itself. The voices seeped through cracks, slipped under doors, pressed against windows. "Are you awake? Let us in. The bell remembers you. The mountain wants you back. We are cold, so cold." One voice cut through them all. Low, resonant, metal scraping bone. "Jonas Hawley." Jonas froze. Hand on his shotgun. Again, the voice. "Jonas Hawley. Foreman. Come to the tower. Come answer the toll you ignored." Jonas dropped the gun. He hadn't realized until that moment the voice coming through the door was his father's, dead in the 1887 collapse. Clara's night of terror. Clara sat at the foot of her bed, gripping her diary. Her mother had fallen asleep from exhaustion, but Clara could not close her eyes. The fog pressed against the window in slow, pulsing waves. Then she heard it, a soft tapping on the glass. Tap, tap. She didn't look. Tap, tap. A whisper followed. "Clara, open your eyes." She clenched them shut tighter. "Clara, I need you." The voice shifted, became younger. Weaker. "Clara, it's Eli. I'm scared. I can't see anything down here." Her breath caught. She knew it wasn't Eli. She knew nothing inside the fog was her friend, but she turned her head anyway just for a second. A face stared at her through the glass. Not living, not dead. A face pressed from inside the fog. Features stretched thin, eyes dark and hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. Clara screamed instead. The fog face mirrored her, expression perfectly. Then the face snapped out of existence as if erased. Clara slammed the curtains shut and crawled under her blanket, shaking uncontrollably. She wrote one final entry that night. "It doesn't just want our bodies. It wants our memories. Our voices. Our names." And beneath it, "The bell is choosing." The night the chosen were marked around 3 a.m., something unseen passed through the town. Not a creature, not a shadow. A pressure. People described it differently. A wave of cold. A hand brushing their spine. A presence moving through their walls. An exhale against their neck. But everyone felt it. When it passed, 5 people had faint, dark streaks across their doorframes, thin lines, like soot or ash drawn in a vertical slash. Jonas Hawley. Clara Whitlow, Martha Kincaid, Mary Beth Harper, Elder Nathaniel Pike. The marked, those the bell had chosen, inside each home. The temperature dropped. Candles guttered. Shadows lengthened. Breath misted. And from the bell tower came a sound. Not a ring. Not a toll. A single, hollow gasp. The bell was inhaling. Preparing for something. Elder Pike's confession. As the marked gathered in Martha's home, dragged there by fear, instinct, or blind desperation, Elder Pike forced himself upright, leaning heavily on the table. "Listen to me," he rasped. "You must understand why the bell was made." Jonas stepped forward. "We already know it's metal from the collapse." Pike shook his head violently. "No, not just metal. Not just iron." He looked at them with hollow eyes. "They didn't recover all the bodies. They couldn't. The mountain wouldn't let them. So they took what they could. Boots, tools, helmets, shards, and bones." Mary Beth gagged. Martha covered her mouth. Clara went pale. Pike continued. "The founders melted everything together, the iron and whatever clung to it. They believed a bell forged from miners would protect their sons." He shuddered. "But it does not protect. It remembers, and remembering hurts." He pointed toward the tower. "The dead want justice. The bell wants a body." Jonas whispered. "A body for what?" Pike swallowed hard. "For the thing that lives inside it." The tower opens. A sound tore through the night, deep and grinding. The bell tower door burst open. Fog poured out in a solid sheet, spiraling upward like a tornado of ghosts. It twisted, curled, and formed a towering silhouette. A shape, a body of fog and iron, something with too many limbs and a face. Like stretched metal. The bell rope whipped out behind it like a tail. The shape turned and looked directly at the marked. Jonas staggered back. Martha clutched her rosary. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Mary Beth whispered Eli's name over and over. Elder Pike whispered one last thing. "Do not let it touch you." But they were too slow. The tower thing stepped forward and the bell began to ring from the inside out. Not struck, not pulled, rung by something clawing at its walls. Each toll was a scream. Each scream was a name. Each name grew louder. Fog surged toward the marked. And of everything went dark. Pitch black. Absolute. Crushing. The bell screamed. The fog roared. Voices wept from within the metal, and the town of Harlow Bend began to disappear. One house at a time, one cry at a time, one soul at a time. By the first days of February 1903, the town of Harlow Bend had stopped ringing its church bell. By the second, the bell no longer needed ringing at all. And by the third, the mountain finally took back what it believed it was owed, not in a collapse, not in a fire, but in a silence so total and so precise that it felt like a pair of hands closing around the throat of the town. Harlow Bend vanished piece by piece, in a darkness the sunlight could not chase away, and those who survived never spoke of what they saw again. The long dark, when the fog swallowed the marked. The world did not vanish all at once. There was a momenta. Brief, trembling moment when Clara, Jonas, Martha, Mary Beth, and Elder Pike still existed in a half-world between sound and silence. They could hear breathing, not their own. A crowd of breath around them, wet, shallow, rasping, like lungs that had forgotten how to work. When their vision finally adjusted, they were still inside Martha Kincaid's home, but it was wrong. The walls bulged inward, as if pushed by invisible hands. Shadows flickered across the ceiling in impossible directions. The fog was alive around their ankles, twisting upward like grasping fingers. Elder Pike whispered, "Don't move." But the fog moved for them. It rose in a spiral, engulfing the center of the room. And in that churning mass of gray, shapes appeared, faces of miners lost decades before. Their mouths open, their eyes dark hollows, their hands reaching. Clara whimpered as one face drifted inches from hers. It was her uncle, who died when she was 6. "Help me," it mouthed. But there was no sound. Fog swallowed the words. Jonas tried to reach for Clara, but the fog tightened around his wrist, cold as the grave, pulling him back. The room tilted. A low chime pulsed through the walls, a heartbeat made of iron. The bell was calling them inward, taken to the tower without footsteps, without motion. The five of them found themselves standing at the base of the church tower. They had no memory of crossing the room, or opening the door, or stepping into the night. The fog had moved them like pieces on a board. The bell tower loomed above them, its outline warping in the swirling mist. The open door yawned black, and from within came a hollow, metallic groan like the bell itself was breathing. Elder Pike forced himself upright. His voice cracked. "It wants one of us out of vessel, a voice." Jonas glared. "How do you know that?" Pike clutched the ledger tight. "Because it wrote to me." Before Jonas could demand more, something inside the tower shifted a scraping, dragging sound. The bell rope slithered out of the darkness, coils of rough hemp writhing across the ground like a living serpent. It wound around Clara's ankle. She screamed a knife-thin sound that cut the night. Jonas lunged and grabbed the rope, trying to pry it loose, but the rope yanked them both toward the tower. Martha and Mary Beth pulled on Jonas's coat, trying to anchor him. The rope tightened. Clara sobbed. The fog thickened. And then Elder Pike stepped forward. "Take me." Everything froze. The rope loosened around Clara's ankle. Jonas collapsed backward with her. Martha steadied them both. Pike walked into the tower, the ledger in his arms. He did not look back. Elder Pike's offering inside the tower. The air shimmered with cold. The bell swayed gently, though nothing touched it. Shadows rippled across its iron skin like reflections on water. Elder Pike knelt before it. "You know my name," he whispered. The bell vibrated. "And I know yours." The vibration deepened. Pike opened the ledger to the final page. Ink bled across it like a dark tide, new words appearing, written by a hand that did not exist. "The elder must ring the bell. The elder must pay the price." Pike closed his eyes. "I accept." Outside, the others heard a single strangled cry. Then the bell rang. Not with a toll but with a scream. Scream made of 46 broken lives. A scream made of iron. A scream made of every breath trapped. Beneath the ridge. It shook the tower. It shook the town. It shook the bones of the living. Martha dropped to her knees. Mary Beth covered her ears and sobbed. Jonas held Clara so tightly she could barely draw breath. When the scream faded, the fog receded enough for them to see inside. The bell hung still. Elder Pike was nowhere. Only the ledger remained, lying at the tower threshold, its pages fluttering in an unseen wind. What the fog left behind, the fog pulled back as though satisfied, like a predator who had eaten well. But the night was not over. Small, whispering shapes drifted across the ground, translucent figures walking without weight. Miners. All 40-6. Their boots did not touch the earth. Their faces were hollow. Their helmets were dented. Their mouths gaped open in silent chants. One by one, they walked toward the mine entrance. Jonas whispered, "Where are they going?" Martha swallowed. "Home." The miners disappeared into the fog, into the trees, into the ridge, as though pulled toward the place they died. And as the chived into the fog, into the trees, into the ridge, as though pulled toward the place they died. Last fading figure slipped into the night. The fog collapsed in on itself with a soft, dying sigh, leaving the town exposed, silent and cold. The stars returned. The darkness retreated. The mountain exhaled. But Harlow Bend did not feel safe. It felt empty. Like a body that had lost its heart. The aftermath. The sun rose gray and thin over Harlow Bend. The marked gathered in the churchyard. No one spoke. The tower door was cracked open. The bell hung motionless. The rope lay limp on the floor. Jonas lifted the ledger. Every page was blank. Completely wiped clean, except for the very last one. A single sentence had burned itself into the parchment. "The bell is satisfied. For now." Clara stepped back. Martha crossed herself. Mary Beth sank to the ground. Sobbing. Jonas closed the ledger gently, as if afraid it might bite. What do we do now? Clara whispered. No one answered, because there was no answer. They gathered what they could and fled Harlow Bend by knew not together. Not as a group, but one by one, like survivors slipping away from a battlefield. By nightfall, the town was empty. No footsteps. No voices. No breath. Only the bell tower remained. Watching. Waiting. What became of Harlow Bending the years that followed? Travelers passed through the hollow and reported strange things. 1. No birds ever flew overhead. Not one. Not ever. 2. The fog lingered even in summer. Thin, low, coiling around the broken fence posts. 3. The church bell would sometimes ring, not with a full toll, just one soft, metallic breath. 4. Names appeared carved on the tower stones, names of men long dead, names of those who fled. And on say just once a traveler reported hearing a girl's voice whisper from inside the bell, "We're still here." The final witness 26 years later, in 1929. A surveyor named Harold Kimball entered Harlow Bend with 2 assistants. They were tasked with mapping old mining sites. They never found the mine entrance, but they found the church. The tower had partially collapsed. The roof caved in. The bell lay cracked on its side, half buried in moss and leaves, but Harold swore until the day he died that when they approached the bell, it vibrated faintly. Like a heartbeat. One assistant placed his hand on the iron and staggered back. "It's warm," he whispered. Harold stepped closer. There were words etched into the bell nut, carved, not stamped but raised as if pushed outward from inside the metal. He read them aloud. "We are not done ringing." The wind shifted. Fog rolled down the ridge. Harold dropped his notebook and ran. He never returned. The forest eventually swallowed Harlow Bend. Whole. The mines collapsed. The path to the church vanished beneath decades of weeds. But on certain nights, cold nights, still nights when the moon is thin and pale, travelers claim they hear a single, hollow toll from deep within the trees. A toll with no hands upon it. A toll with no church to hold it. A toll that feels like a name. Maybe yours. Maybe mine. Maybe someone the mountain is still waiting to reclaim.